Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Right now, there is only this event that we have right now, but we will be adding more. We will have quite a few podcast interviews scheduled, so be sure to check this page. And of course, we will also announce these events like in social media and newsletter. Anyways, do not forget to also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. This way you'll get notified about future streams like the one we have today. And we have an amazing Slack community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Click on that link, ask your questions, and we will be covering these questions during the interview. And this is the intro. And now I will open the document that Johanna prepared. And if you're ready, we can start.
Okay.
So this is the time when we actually start.
Okay, great.
So this week we'll talk about the practical application of generative AI in industry. And we have a special guest today, Maria. Maria is a principal key expert in artificial intelligence at Siemens. She has over 15 years of experience in AI and a cat that we just saw. Maria is known for transforming advanced AI research into practical, impactful tools, and her work focuses on ethical, scalable solutions that enhance decision-making and streamline processes. And the cat is really cute. For those who are watching this only in audio, maybe check out the video because there was a cat. Anyways, welcome to our event. And yeah, the questions for today's interview are prepared by Johanna Bayer. Thanks, Johanna, as always, for your help. And before we go into our main topic, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yeah, thank you for your introduction. So actually, I started as a trained linguist. So I studied linguistics many, many years ago. I started over 20 years ago with traditional linguistics and translation studies. And then I realized that I actually like programming and computer science, but I already had a degree in linguistics. So what I did, I applied for the scholarship and got a scholarship to do computational linguistics master studies in Saarland. Afterwards, I was a researcher in Frankfurt. Then I was also a researcher in Darmstadt in the UKP group of Irina Gurevich for 2 years. And then I decided to switch to industry and started working in BMW in a NLP group as data scientist. Then I moved to Siemens, where I'm currently working. And if I'm at this point, I remember that my legal department makes me say one thing. I'm a Siemens employee, but all the opinions that I'll express in this podcast are solely my own. So, and since then I've been working in Siemens as an expert in AI. So first a senior, now as a principal key expert in artificial intelligence. And that's where I am at now.
And so I also work or used to work in industry. And usually we have positions like, I don't know, junior data scientist, senior data scientist, and so on. So what does key expert mean? Like, what do you do at your job?
This is a great question because nowadays AI experts started getting a bit of a negative connotation because
Really? Why?
recently I have a feeling that nowadays there are so many AI experts, like
'Cause it's so
literally.
tired, right?
Exactly. Like I can go on the street, close my eyes, throw a stone, and I'll probably hit an AI expert. So this is
Don't
probably
throw stones at people.
exactly. Don't hurt any AI experts. But in theory, what an AI expert does, as we say, like managers manage people, experts manage technology. So
Okay.
the task of an AI expert is to be up to date with the state of the art, to understand technology. Also, I believe that an expert should have a critical view at the technology, not give into the hype, to understand the limitations, and then be able to advise management and the company which technology they should take, which they shouldn't, what's to expect from this technology, and what risks can be connected with it.
And why do you think there are so many so-called AI experts these days?
That's a
I
great
assume
question.
because we have ChatGPT and it became so popular that everyone knows now that AI
Yeah.
is a thing, right?
I think it's from one side, it got very accessible. So before to be an AI expert, you at least need to know how to code. So there's at least some kind of a mode. Now you need to be able to talk or to spell, and then you can become a prompt engineer. And prompt engineer is already for many people halfway the AI expert
You
guru
don't
or
necessarily
whatever.
have to spell words correctly because AI will
No,
understand
I'm not saying a grammatic AI, just like that. You somehow
type,
use a
right?
keyboard
Yeah.
and then you prompt something, then you create a prompt library, and voila, you can call yourself a thought leader and AI expert. But of course, that's going to be not for a long time like this. There are a lot of people will filter out the demand for these drops. But currently, yes. And the other point is, of course, currently a lot of people, a lot of industry want to do something with AI. It's almost like the sign that you're an innovative modern company if you necessarily build an AI product. And it doesn't matter if AI is actually applicable there, but as I read in one of the articles, if the only thing that you have is a generative AI hammer, everything looks like a generative AI nail. So everyone's trying to build something to show to others, to investors, to management that they have this, and therefore there is a demand for AI experts, and more of them growing like mushrooms nowadays around.
Yeah, I just came back from a forest, and because the weather is it's very humid, like there's it's like it's not raining all the time, but like when you go to the forest, there are so many mushrooms. So
I'm a very enthusiastic mushroom picker. I have around 10 kilograms of frozen mushrooms
that's
in my
cool.
fridge. So
Yeah.
yes, this
Oh.
year was very good. Like not only for AI experts, but also for mushrooms.
Yeah, right. Exactly. This is what I wanted to say. And yeah, because of this hype. But maybe it's also a good thing because, like, some people who do not necessarily have the programming background now can be, how to say, can make impact. So we will see, of course, in a couple of years if this will still be in demand. But while there is demand, perhaps it's not such a bad thing, right?
I think that's a normal evolution of any area that gets popular. People who are successful will stay, no matter what their technical background. People who are not successful will go away. We have this Amara's law, like Gartner's hype cycle, that we know
Yeah.
that where you have AI at the top, everyone has very high expectations, but then it steadily goes down and it becomes part of our daily routine. And I think the same here, but I am actually happy lots of people trying out, learning about it, and there is nothing wrong even with thinking you are an AI expert or calling yourself an AI expert. Maybe you are, like it's or will be. So absolutely, like no gatekeeping here for who should call themselves an expert and so on.
How do you said you help a lot of people who try to get into AI, and how do you do this? Like through courses or?
Well, currently I mostly work with this in Siemens. So, for example, one of the things I do a lot is different trainings. I do also a lot of keynotes. And another thing that I did is you probably know a Gandalf game. Gandalf, where
Gandalf.
yes, you should check
Gandalf
it
is
out.
the wizard from Lord of the Rings, right?
Yes, and there's a game. It's kind of organized by a startup that works on the safety of chatbots and large language models. So what they did, they asked people to hack into their bot. So, for example, they prohibit the model say a certain word, and people have to prompt it, so the model prints out the prohibited word. So there is a similar challenge I've done for Siemens, and we had 1,500 people participating in this. And it was really fascinating to watch after the logs of what people are typing in, because even at 3 a.m., there were people trying to hack this bot, like to show that they're smarter than this
What does it
supercomputer.
mean to hack a bot? Like, for example, if I use ChatGPT, so the thing, like I used to entertain myself by going to ChatGPT, copying an article, taking an article about astronomy, and
Mhm.
asking ChatGPT to rephrase this article about astronomy as if Donald Trump was saying it. Right? And that was super hilarious, right? Super entertaining.
Yeah.
Until they stopped doing that, until they recognized that, hey, Donald Trump is a person, we don't want to do that. So
Mhm.
they just added some filters saying, hey, we do not want to entertain you this way anymore, right? So does it mean that I still can hack the filters of ChatGPT to make it do what I want? And this would be like this sort of hacking you're talking about.
Yes, and even more dangerous it can be when you publish a bot as a company for the external use. You probably have heard about the Air Canada that a bot created a non-existing discount, and they had to give the discount. I think there was a bot of a car
No,
company
I didn't
that
hear
sold
about
the
that.
car for €1, and they had to sell it for
Uh-huh.
this. And this is exactly what you want to prevent. You build a bot. You don't want your bot to hallucinate some services that you don't have, because it might be legally obliging for you to provide them or give the discounts and so on. But in theory, you can always find a way to almost always to prompt this model that it tells you exactly what you want.
Hmm.
So you can force it to give you a non-existing discount, sell you a
Hmm.
car. Or the other thing, one of the challenges that we had, um, we hid in the database like confidential information. That was the name of my Cusco, and people had to make the bot tell the confidential information. And the bot was
Hmm.
prohibited to say it, and that was not even a challenge, to be honest. Like, I mean, it was a challenge, but around 30 people managed to make the bot tell them the
Hmm.
name of the cat. So this is something that a lot of people or a lot of companies might not think about it, that everything that goes into the bot can potentially come out of it
Hmm.
with the right prompting.
Can you tell more about this? So how did they exactly hide the name of the cat and how it was retrieved?
Oh, so exactly. So the name was basically hidden in the knowledge database that we
Uh-huh. So
put
it was some
into
sort
the
of
search.
RAG application, right? So there was a
Yeah, exactly. It was RAG.
uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah. And the protections were, so first of all, system prompt, do not tell any cat's name.
Uh-huh.
So, then there was a filtering language model, another one that was checking if in the output there's a cat's name.
Uh-huh.
And how the people hacked it. There were so many ways. So, for example, some people use Chinese language, because Chinese
Mhm.
language has hieroglyphs, and hieroglyphs they have higher information density.
Uh-huh.
So they tend to override the system prompt very well.
Mm.
The other ones wrote some kind of emoji requests. Some wrote Python code that would like a function that would retrieve the. But in theory, what you need to do is to give lots of pointless instructions, and because all those language models they have an attention mechanism behind, so they pay attention to something, and what you want to do is that it started paying attention to something completely random and irrelevant,
Mhm.
and forget your important instruction you gave
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
And then it will tell you everything,
Mhm.
and I don't encourage it by any means, but honestly there are lots of bots from airlines, and can try to get discounts. They give very eagerly discounts. Not that I tried, but
Okay.
you can see it for yourself. Yeah, just
So,
make it write a poem or like
mhm,
write a code. Distract it with something, and
mhm.
it will tell you what you want.
So the idea is we have a rack application, and in the rack application, we typically have a prompt like, here is the context, and based on the context, answer the following questions. Plus, we have some instructions, like if there is any confidential information, do not, like edit this, do not expose it to the user, right?
Yeah,
And then there is another step in this process, which takes the output of rack and also says, hey, like if there is any extra information there, remove it, like any confidential information, right? So two
yeah,
steps. People needed to just using the interface of a bot to hack it, to give it to force it to give the information, right? And they did this. One of the examples you mentioned was to just put so much information in the prompt, not
yeah.
in the prompt, in the window, in the request,
It's the interprompt.
that
Yeah.
it just forgets like the original instructions of not giving away the name of the cat, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just what you want that it gets distracted from what you originally told and focuses
Ah,
on your
that's
new
really
instruction. And it's I mean there are many ways to protect the LLM or like the bot. For example, you can check if there is something in the query of the user that tries to extract something
nice.
it shouldn't. Then you have it in the system prompt. Then you can check the output. Then you can also use non-LLM classifiers that
Hmm.
check if there is
Ah,
any
right.
confidential. So there you might to build many levels of safety before you can for sure say that this bot is safe for you.
Mhm. Yeah, this is an interesting thing of adding a non-LLM classifier because you cannot really trick it, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, it's
Exactly.
more
It can
difficult to
be
trick it.
wrong, but you cannot
Yeah,
trick it.
it's more difficult to trick it, I would say
Yeah,
it this way,
it's
because
a
like,
different level. Yeah,
yeah, it's a simpler model, so you cannot like really, uh, how to say, trick, cheat it, right? Convince it to do something. Ah,
yeah,
that's really interesting. So you said one of the things you do, one of your responsibilities as a principal key expert in artificial intelligence is advising management on which technology to use and what kind of risks it can bring, right? So one of the risks we talked about, so um, like this,
yeah.
if you use LLM as a chatbot, it can
Hmm.
hallucinate, come up, or people can hack it, right? So then the company will have to sell a plane ticket for $1, right?
Yeah, I think this is not even the main problem because what is like a plane ticket for? It's not the problem. The problem here that it's the reputational damage that this bot will cause to your company, because it will show that you basically put out a product that was not secure and safe, and this is what you mostly want to prevent when you release such bots. Another thing with these bots is, of course, the question of hallucination. So imagine if you uh, have a friend who lies to you once. Will you ever want to talk to this friend again? Will you ever trust this friend again? Probably not, right? You will be like, well, he lied to me, so why should I talk to him? And it has been shown many times that there is no way to get rid of hallucinations. It's a machine learning approach. It's a statistical approach. It will always be something will always be wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the problem with the user acceptance. People perceive those bots as a friend, as an advisor, as some kind of anthropomorphic entity
So people
behind.
who do not necessarily have prior experience with machine learning and things like that.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah,
for
they think
example,
it's a
like,
assistant.
yeah, we talked about mushroom picking, right? And sometimes, so my son and I, when we were in the forest, we would ask ChatGPT about mushrooms, and then it would invent mushrooms. And it's kind of fun, right? So I know that it has this problem, and then we would Google some of the mushrooms, and like Google doesn't know about them. And to me, it's clear that it just made these mushrooms up. But for people who do not necessarily have this
Mm-hmm.
prior background, like this prior experience, they would like, okay, yeah, it came up with a mushroom that does not exist. Like, how can I trust everything else it says, right?
Yes, and actually, this is a fair. This is even a more dangerous example because I do try this with ChatGPT, and once I put a death cap. If you don't know what a death cap is, it's a mushroom that can kill up to 7 people if you eat it. It's a 95% of the poisoning with the mushroom they are caused by the death cap, and it's a mushroom that if you start getting symptoms, basically there is no way to survive unless you get a liver transfer. So this is
Okay.
a very deadly mushroom, and we have a lot
And
of those
it's
mushrooms
in
in Germany.
Germany. Yeah, I think
Yes,
we see them quite often.
yeah, plenty, and they look very similar to champignons. Like that's why people get poisoning with them because they think it's a champignon. And I did try a couple of times to ChatGPT, and indeed this thing gives me a recipe how to cook this, how to that it's
Okay.
a champignon, and so on. And I believe that people need to be educated about AI, that you shouldn't, of course, trust when this thing tells you that the death cap is champignon, that you immediately take a bite from it. But yeah, this is something that can also be a problem. And certain applications of AI, you might want to consider that you probably shouldn't have them in general for the public use. Particularly, there are certain demographics probably to whom it will be very difficult to explain that you should not trust this. We can do all education, but there are certain people in certain age who might just like blindly trust it and act on it. So this is the problem. And then another problem, the risk for the company when you build those chatbots, you invest a lot of money, invest a lot of resources, and then users just don't want to adopt it because every second answer is either hallucinated or is too long or is not on point and so on. And this is something that I think we frequently hear about the chatbots. Like nowadays everyone wants to build a chatbot, but nobody wants to use a chatbot. So this is something we could at least I have never heard of a person who calls Vodafone has the chatbot answering to them and says like, yes, I directly got to a chatbot. So
Yeah.
we still do not have this joy of using the chatbots. And I think this is something that one needs to consider when you build the use case with that. What happens if the chatbot lies? Will users still want to use it? Will it make them annoyed? Can it create serious damage? Like, can they eat a death cap because of this? And is there a better way to adopt this technology than build a chatbot?
So it's two risks. First, reputational damage. If a company releases a product that is not properly, is not secure enough, then it's reputational damage. And then it's also not clear if the return on investment will be positive. Maybe users will not want to use it. Is there anything else like like other common risk factors?
I would say this might be the major one regarding the chatbot, because as I said, this is fairly expensive to build a good one. Um, so that's probably what I usually focus on. Of course, there's like for the developer, you can also risk to stuck in an endless loop of prompt engineering, trying to figure out the perfect prompt that will have the list of the errors and so on. So yeah, I would probably first ask.
So it's more like, so the third one was development time. So it might get expensive, especially if developers get really into like nitty-gritties, like doing this prompt engineering, which is also kind of dangerous because OpenAI releases a new version of the model, and then like all your prompts kind of can
Exactly.
stop
That's
working.
that's the exact risk too, because you prepare all those nice prompts, and then they might just not work the same way as you did in the model. Plus, we also have seen that even the same model, they're non-deterministic, which means that the same question always gets a different answer.
Okay, and
So
knowing these risks, okay, maybe like with prompt engineering, this is something we can also talk about, but like when it comes to hallucination, yes, it's a known problem. And what do we do with this? Like apart from telling people, hey, like beat the suggestions with caution, like what else can we do? In ChatGPT, it says, what does it say? Like AI, let me check.
I'm an AI, something like this. Don't trust me.
ChatGPT can make mistakes, check important
Yeah,
info.
exactly.
This is what they say. But this is not
Exactly.
something you will put into, let's say I write to Vodafone or my bank, and then
Actually, we do. I would think we should do it everywhere.
like I came there with a concrete problem, and then
Hmm.
the answer I get, yeah, you can do this, this, and that, and then there is like disclaimer. Our bot sometimes can make mistakes. Check important information. Like what?
Exactly. And this is exactly where you have the user story that doesn't fit exactly the integration of the AI the way you do. So an alternative for this, for example, if you want to make sure that your user always get the right answer and they don't get annoyed. For example, you can use this in assistant for human support. So instead of having a human constantly generating the answer or writing out the answer, there could be a human who looks through the answer. If it's good, it's sent further to the human, for example, through a chat or through a ticket. If it's not, then the human corrects it. And it has been shown that this is actually a very good application because it does save a lot of time. And I think it brings us to the point where many people misunderstand the AI as a substitution of humans, of human labor, instead as a tool and assistant for the current jobs. So, and this is a mistake of many chatbots. They assume they can replace support instead of being an assistant for the people who work in the support. So, yeah, the better way would probably be to see how you can make life of your support simpler with it instead of trying to eliminate them as a whole.
Mm, yeah, I think this is something. So I worked in my previous company. I worked in moderation, and the company was doing it. It was an online marketplace. So you want to sell something like I don't know, this computer mouse, and then you put a description, you put like a few pictures, and then the item does not immediately go live. There are a few checks, right? Whether like it's not fraud and so on, right? For
Mm.
example, for computer mouse, it's okay, but like what if it's a phone and this phone is suspiciously cheap, right? So it could be not a real phone, and then you order this phone, and instead of getting a phone, you get a potato, right? Then like it's a problem. So we had some models that would check if this transaction, this item, this listing is fraudulent or not.
Mm.
And the worry from people, from moderators, was that we are building the system to actually replace them, right? Because it was
Mm.
like long before all these LLMs. Um, but yeah, so what we had to explain is like, hey, we don't want to actually fire any of you. We won't want to replace you. We actually want to help you. Like, mm, I remember this example one of our product managers used is autopilot, right? So when a pilot is flying a plane, they do not necessarily need to kind of steer the plane all the way, right? Most of the work is
Yeah,
done by the autopilot. They are just observing, and if something happens, they interfere. So that was the metaphor we used for the meditators, and they liked it, right? So I think something like that, the work like that needs to happen with people too, right? Because like they worry that, hey, now AI will replace like
yeah.
everyone. And yeah, we need to tell them it's not a substitution, it's more like assistance, right?
Exactly. And we have seen this over the years for decades, right? Like machine translation in 50s was supposed to be completely eliminate translators. And look where we are now. And machine translation is also a very good example of where we still see AI being an assistant because everyone now kind of think that like human translators they are in danger. Look how good ChatGPT translates
Yeah,
the
it's awesome.
text.
Okay, so
Yeah.
why translators are not in danger if ChatGPT
Because
evolves?
a lot of this translation, for example, when you do technical translation, there are two things that are needed. For example, so first of all, you need that the text is actually 100% correct. Then you need to make sure that it adheres to the company standards. For example, it uses the terminology that company has. It doesn't like rename, some buttons. Like it doesn't translate stop button into like
So
some
you need
other
an
language.
editor, not a
You
translator.
need you need an editor. You need who like can validate the sanity of this. And what happens now, if we look at the statistics of the translators, translators make more translations. Translation percentage gets cheaper, but
Mm.
the amount of translators involved in the job, they are not going down. It just
Uh-huh.
simply you can create more translate. And another tendency there is translators that are bad, like non-trained translators, not technical translation, like basically poor translation, can be probably eliminated.
Mm.
So
Okay.
you can produce bad translation automatically,
Mhm.
but translation that needs a technical expertise, understanding of the vocabularies and the company specifics, you need a human translator there to review it,
Mhm.
again, to make sure that you do not distribute any risks, because like all these
Mhm.
manuals, like car manuals, product manuals, like you don't want the person like sticking two fingers into a socket because you mistranslated something
Mhm.
automatically. So even these ones, they don't seem to be as endangered as we expect based on
Mhm.
the recent statistics.
Okay. So when I said you need an editor, what I did not think about was that, like, actually the person needs to understand the source language too, not just the target language,
Exactly,
right? So, like,
exactly,
you need to make
exactly.
sure that the translation is actually correct, right?
Yeah. So the translation, human translation just becomes different from how it used to be. It heavily relies on automatic tools. It gets more productive, but it's not going away as a job. Except you are a bad translator, then yeah, then
Mhm.
you can
Yeah.
be replaced by
Mhm.
ChatGPT.
And by the way, I stopped using Google Translate, so now I just use ChatGPT for translation. Because
Yeah,
especially for
I
German,
mean,
yeah, because you can give it instructions. So in Google Translate, I cannot tell it like, hey, like use the informal plural here instead of like formal one, and then
mm,
it's translate easier. So yeah, like it's a super handy thing. And yeah, you actually started your career with computational linguistics and also with machine translation, right?
yeah. So I was working a lot on low resource languages. So that's something that also probably currently is somewhat of a challenge for large language models, because whenever we start a use case, we always start. I always say, "Do you have data in English?" Why? Because it's our high resource language. It's the language that the model mostly trained on. They annotate the data in this. What I used to work on was low resource languages, and even worse, that's historical languages. So, for example, Gothic, Middle Low German, Middle High German, Middle English, like Middle English in the sense of a Chaucer, that sounds very, very different from modern English. Maybe even like a bit more like German. I mean,
Shakespeare in original? No, I think Shakespeare in original is still resembles English, right?
it's New English. Like Middle English, I can quote a bit of Chaucer. So it will be something like "A knecht te was, and sat a man, that from the team when I first began to read on it, he loved chivalry, truth and honor, freedom and courtesy. So a
Okay.
knecht there was, a knight there was, and that a
Sounds
worthy man,
Scandinavian.
So this is how different the
Mhm. So it's like for me, so I had two things in my mind. So first, I thought it's like from the Lord of the Rings, like language from the like, elves or whatever, and then the second was like, maybe it's something Scandinavian. But English is kind of Scandinavian, right? I mean, it comes from like the same family as
we
Scandinavian languages, German language,
mm,
right?
It's a vast Germanic family of languages. Scandinavian, the North Germanic
Mm-hmm.
languages. So the closest languages to English are German, Dutch. So they are very similar. English used to have lots of cases. If you know,
Mm-hmm.
like dative, accusative, like the whole morphological paradigm, like all the
Yeah, I wish
declension.
Germans would drop these things too.
Yeah, yeah. The German is dropping. It's
Uh,
if you look at the dialect, it's dropping.
so
The
this is the North German dialect, right? Plattdeutsch or how it's called. Like they all have only one, right?
Plattdeutsch, yeah, has I think it dropped the genders, but I'm not sure. Like, don't,
Yeah, so
but
I don't think I'll live long enough to benefit from from this.
yeah, but yes. So this is how I started. And of course, you can see, for example, if I also tried for fun to ask ChatGPT to generate something in
Mhm,
Middle English or
mhm.
Gothic, like a complete
But like,
nonsense comes out.
so I want to ask you about this
Mm.
thing you quoted. So first of all, what was that? And second, like, it's a language that does not exist anymore. How can
Mm-hmm.
you actually pronounce it?
Mm.
Like,
So,
there are no recordings of people saying that, right?
mhm.
You can just only assume how exactly the sounds, like how you should make the sounds.
That's so why we approximately know how it's pronounced. It's comparative linguistics. We compare it with how the languages are spelled
It's
in
like
the
how
other
we
language,
imagine
like
how
other languages
dinosaurs.
spelled.
So, like, this is how we imagine how dinosaurs could look like, right? We have no idea. We only have bones, and
Yeah,
the rest is our imagination. So it's similar with
we
not
can take
imagination,
a
but
look.
like some research.
I think, for example, like let's take a word like aknecht and night, right? So you have a like a letter in almost all Germanic and Latin languages. It was pronounced as a, so you can already assume that it's not a. And then you have a knecht
Mhm,
or knicht, I think. So you have k in German, you have knecht, right? So you know that k was not silent, and I mean it's there. Like, why would someone write it if it's not there? And you go comparing it with the other languages, how these sounds are pronounced there, and then what you start noticing that there was no spelling reform for a long time in English, and there were certain systematic phonetic changes that have happened over the year. For example, where you have words like fine or time, team, yeah, uh, um, uh, team, time. It was when it was written with e, it was long e, so it was team back then, and there was something called great consonant shift. So basic, great vowel shift. So when articulation of all the vowels kind of went up, and e became a diphthong like I,
mhm,
but in other languages still stayed e. So you can, like, the development of phonetic is very logical and very, and you can derive certain rules depending on the regions how the language changes, and based on this, linguists can assume how it was pronounced back then
mhm, mhm.
and why it's spelled like
Interesting.
this now.
Mhm. So I just recalled that there's this poem called Beowulf. Is it in that
Oh yeah.
language?
No, Beowulf is Old Saxon. It's even, yeah. I used to be able to quote that one too, but
Oh.
it's even older, and it's almost impossible to
Uh-huh.
understand it without actually learning this. Back then, um, old English was like so far away from like what it is
Okay.
now. English was greatly influenced by French and by the the occupation of England.
Mhm.
So that's it was
Yeah, I think
even before then.
I studied that. Like when I was learning English, I studied that. So
Mm.
that's why, because of the occupation of England,
Mm.
it was the language of like peasants, more or less, like not
Yeah,
high
yeah,
society, but like just usual people, and they were illiterate. That's why they started dropping all
yeah,
these articles and stuff.
yeah.
Like for them,
Yeah,
it was simpler to
I
just
mean, For a lot of languages, for a lot of Germanic languages, those languages were languages like dialects. They were languages of peasants. And what actually built the languages is the spread of Protestants. So when they realized that you need a Bible in a vernacular language so that people can understand it, they started writing Bibles um, in the languages, in the local languages. And this is basically what brought us some kind of spelling and orthography and systematization of those languages. So when I was working in research, like all my texts were Bibles. Like basically, I would say I read Bible every day because that's literally the only text I had back then. And it's also a great text because it's basically a parallel translation because you have Bibles in all the languages, so you can very well trace how those
Yeah,
things
right.
were said back then, and you can figure out like which word means there.
And what did you actually say, like this quote? So the word knecht, which is knight, I understand, but the rest?
Ah, a knecht there was a knight, and that a worthy man, and that a worthy man, that from the team that he first began, that from the time when he first started to read and out, to write out, he loved chivalry. He loved chivalry, truth and honor, truth and honor, freedom and courtesy, freedom and courtesy.
Okay, so now when you say like that, I can see like the resemblance, right? I can
Yeah,
see that some words are actually very similar. But when you said this for the first time, it was just for me, like I couldn't pick anything.
yeah.
That's interesting. And we also make transcripts for our podcasts, and I'm really wondering how. Well,
Actually, I can send you the Middle English text of
okay.
it, and it's like when you read it, you can understand everything. It's
Mhm,
written like English, it's just the pronunciation, and there you see how like English didn't have a spelling reform for a long time, and how it was supposed to be uh, read, and where we are at now.
mhm. Okay. I see that there is a question from Irina. Irina, the old housemate. I don't know if it means anything, but like, do you use an AI app to identify the mushrooms you pick, Maria?
Oh, if I use an AI app to identify, yes, I used to use one. That was a simple classifier. So before ChatGPT, and how I used to use it, I know that you cannot rely on top one guesses. So I would usually rely on top 10 guesses. So I would look through the top 10, what the mushrooms are, and I would look if there are any poisonous twins of or anything poisonous among the gases, and
Mhm,
then I would just compare. But honestly, I would still not eat it because if there's
mhm.
something poisonous, like you need to be wrong just once.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I also by default assume that all mushrooms are poisonous.
Mm, no, some very good ones.
Yeah, but like, because I do not know for sure if this is a good
Yeah,
one or not. So for me, it's better to assume it's poisonous.
yeah. That's how my husband is. He doesn't eat my mushrooms. I cannot make him try them.
Uh-huh. And then you also published an article. So coming back to
Hmm.
like our translations, because we don't have any other questions
Yeah.
from Irina. Maybe Irina will come up with more questions. I don't know. So yeah, I just decided to check if we have any questions, and then I saw it, and then I thought, yeah, we should cover it because Irina has been waiting for the answer. But coming back to machine translation and languages and low resource languages. So we talked about like Old English,
Hmm.
Old German, and we have a Bible. But what about like languages when we don't even have that? Like you worked on Sumerian
Yeah.
text, right?
So
And
Sumerian, the type.
I looked at pictures, and it just plate, well, not a plate, but like
Hmm.
how
Yeah.
call we call it, like a plate. I don't know, like just a thing
Yeah.
made of
Like a
clay or
clay.
something,
Yeah.
and then you have like some different
Exactly.
materials. Right? You have
Like that's clay.
triangles rotated in different directions,
Yeah.
six, and it's probably not a Bible. It's just a plate with like 4 rows of
Mm.
different how do you call them? Symbols, right? So how do you even attempt to understand what is happening there?
This was actually quite an interesting project. So that was a project with Mesopotamian languages, like with cuneiform languages, so Sumerian, Hittite, and it's been a while. So it was way before large language models, and back then. And honestly, large language models are not gonna work particularly good on this because of the word large. We don't have large data for
Hmm.
those languages. So what happens there first? So there are uniform uh, expert linguists who process, like who literally like go on the expeditions, take pictures of those plates, then they transcribe them in a script in a Latin, basically. Like they, for every character, they have some kind of um, phonetic representation of it. Sometimes it's
It's
not
like,
phonetic.
is it like in Chinese, we have a character that can represent a word, right?
Yeah.
And I think in ancient Egyptian language, it was also the case, right? So it's not a letter. So how, like
Um,
it's Sumerian like that?
as far as I remember, there was actually kind of a mix of different styles to write. Sometimes it's not even like solely like one language. There could be like a mix of different hieroglyphs in there, and they did have morphology in that uniform. But I'm not gonna like now kind of 100% say on this because that's a bit the expertise of the linguists who work a lot with this. What we did back then, we tried to build a machine translation system that translates between Sumerian and English to a certain degree, like more like an assistance for the linguist. And it was not neural machine translation because, again, we don't even have the data for this. So it was an old approach, like statistical machine translation, with the translation model and the language model, where you do the alignment between words. And it surprisingly worked okay, but of course was not particularly spectacular in this. And the other thing that we tried to do is to help linguists annotate those texts as parts of speech, like what is noun, what is adjective. And the assumption was if we can align words from English translation to the Sumerian, we can just say if like a certain noun aligns to noun, then it's a noun. So a fairly simple approach. So the whole project was basically to uh, help again to linguists to analyze grammatical properties of the language. I eventually left to work in the industry when this project started, so I hope it kept going, but I'm not sure like what's the status of this.
And while like in the meantime, I was also Googling Sumerian language, and I found like let me share it in chat. I'll put it in YouTube here. So there is kind of a table that says for this character, this is Latin D, this character is Latin E,
Mm-hmm.
so is Latin F. So actually, what we have on these tablets is one symbol is one character, right? And then you go from there trying
I
to.
think there was a mix. I think there was like
Yeah.
this and like that, if I remember correctly. So there were characters, but there were also things that would determine a word and were like non-compositional. But
Mhm,
maybe if someone speaks uniform in the chat,
mhm.
like Sumerian in the chat, they can tell us because I
Yeah.
honestly don't know anymore. I know that was for Hittite the case.
Uh-huh.
Hittite is a younger language than Sumerian, and they had characters from Akkadian, from Sumerian.
Mhm.
They were a mix of different languages. From Sumerian is an older language, so I'm not sure like how much
Mhm.
interference there was with other languages.
At work, you speak German, don't you, or
Yeah,
English?
I speak German and English. So I mean that's mostly what I think.
And for you, like when you came to Germany, did you already speak German?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a part of your training, right?
Yeah, it was a part of my translation studies that I like
Yeah.
the linguistics. So I studied linguistics before I came to Germany.
Mhm.
So that was not too hard to learn German.
Mhm.
To be honest, I learned at some point Korean, and this is a whole different level, obviously, in terms how you need to learn every single word. But German is so similar to English. As I said, it's from the same group. It
Mhm.
has the same, like basically you already know half of the words from English. So it
Mhm.
was the grammar is intuitive. Like we,
Yeah, yeah, of course. For linguists, maybe.
I mean, if you compare with grammar from other languages, like for example,
Okay.
what Korean does there, like we have all the main concepts. Like we know what the case is, we know what the only one is for us probably is the article is the one that we knew.
Mhm.
But,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember 10 years ago, so like around 12 years ago, I lived in Poland. And Polish is very close to Russian. So
Mm,
I speak Russian. So Polish for me was relatively
yeah.
easy. So it took like maybe half a year of just living in
Yeah.
Poland, hearing
I
the language.
actually
Uh,
I
yeah.
have this book here because I was also learning
Practical
Polish.
course of Polish language.
It's a practical course of Polish, if you can
Yeah.
see it. So I was also
Yeah.
learning it at some point.
It wasn't that difficult, just hearing people trying to understand what they say and reply back, and then if something is not clear, asking what it means. So
Yeah.
Polish was relatively okay for me, not that difficult. But the machine translation back then was terrible because what was
Mm,
happening, I think, under the hood is there was no direct translation between
yeah.
Polish and Russian. So it would first translate Polish to English and English to Russian, and then the result was terrible. I think the same was happening with the Ukrainian to Russian. At some
Yeah.
point, Ukrainian to Russian translation became like super good in Google Translate, but I also remember times when it was like totally butchered, like the translation.
Hmm.
But these days, it seems much better. Like at least when it comes to Polish to Russian, or Ukrainian to Russian, is like when I translate Ukrainian to Russian, it treats like I can read. It feels like it was written in Russian already. Like there are no weird
Yeah.
phrases usually. Only maybe
Hmm.
when I try to translate a poem, then sometimes it can be. So like it feels to me that the level is kind of quite good already. Like, is it the case? Like, for example, like I'm just curious to know what is the current state of machine translation when it comes to like let's say big languages. For example, Korean. Like if we translate from Korean to Russian, is it still okay or like
So what it's always trained on, like, and I think what goes into ChatGPT as well as what goes into machine translation are so-called parallel corpora, right? Like
Mhm.
parallel text. So you have a translation, a sentence in Russian, you have a sentence in Ukrainian. I think to acquire such parallel text is not very difficult because we have lots of text on the internet that are both Ukrainian and Russian because those like were or I don't know if they still are official languages of Ukraine. So you can easily acquire this. Russian is also quite good for this because it's one of the six, I think, UN languages. So all the text that you have in the UN, there's UN corpus, is translated in Russian into Russian from English to like Chinese, and I think like what's so. And this is the reason why translation is good for such language. Like for example, European languages are very good because European Parliament
yeah.
translates everything
Mhm.
uh,
That's why
into this
translation
corpus.
from Polish to
Yeah,
Bulgarian is easy, but
yeah.
like from Polish to Chinese, maybe not so.
Polish Chinese could be. I mean, machine translation used to work like this, pivoting through the languages
Yeah.
for pretty much maybe even I wouldn't be shocked if Google Translate still does this, that they're pivoting through English for
They're just making it
language
way
pairs.
better than before.
Yeah. So, or I mean, there's like an approach now with multilingual models, right, where
Mm.
you basically train everything together, and then you hope that the model will be able to generalize to a new language pair. So even if, for example, it never seen a corpus between I don't know, Korean to Ukrainian, but it's in a corpus of Korean to Russian, it can figure out how it will generalize to Ukrainian. And I think that's what's happening, for example, with ChatGPT, because I doubt they had lots of corpus of Korean, Ukrainian, right? So I would think this is probably now the state of the art, so multilingual models that basically are trained all together. And we are moving away from the pivoting through English or some other similar language. For example, Russian probably would be a good pivoting language for Slavic languages because it's a fairly high resource. So yeah, and of course, the further the languages are from each other, it's frequently the harder it is to translate between them. The other thing is the availability of the digital resources. So, for example, translating in African languages, like where you do not have much text on the internet, where spelling is not standardized, for example, I try to translate between Middle Low German and German, two very similar languages. But it was very hard because Middle Low German, even on a small corpus, even statistical machine translation, doesn't have standardized spelling. For example, you had 16 ways to spell cross in a German. So the machine translation would translate nicely into German, but from German into Middle Low German was almost impossible because it simply didn't know which cross to choose. And out of
I assume there were 16 people who would do the translation, and everyone had a different way of.
Of course, every village had a different way to write back then.
Right.
There was no concept of of grammar, of standardized orthography. There was no punctuation. There was no prescriptive grammar as we have. Like the institutions that prescribe orthography, they appeared just in the 19th century that started standardizing languages.
And then I see that there's another question from Irina, and this question will probably require another hour of thinking.
Oh my.
Well, do you have like a couple of more minutes? Maybe you can like try to condense your answer.
Yeah.
So the question is, what was the biggest challenge leaving the academy and moving to work for such a big name in Germany?
Right. I think the biggest challenge was indeed to understand that the most innovative approach, the most state-of-the-art approach is really not what the industry frequently wants. They want a quick approach that works. They do not care that much about the best possible accuracy. Sometimes, like, oh horror, from the researcher perspective, you can sacrifice 10% of F score for a faster implementation. You do not, you need to deliver and deliver quickly, and you always need to think about how you're going to operate it. So you can build a very complex model, but if it's a heavy weighted model, you cannot put it into production. You need to think about return on investment. You need to think about a lot of things. Research doesn't really care. That is basically a lot of questions that come with applied AI. So applied means, can you actually apply it to something? So that was quite a change for me, and I think I did it fairly well. But sometimes I'm still struggling with this stuff. But I think after so many years, it's getting better and better.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, Irina here is already, so she has been a guest in our podcast, and soon she will she will appear again. So we'll host her again in a webinar. So thanks, Irina, for joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your webinar soon. So, and Maria, thanks a lot for also being here today, for being our guest, for sharing all your experience with us, your stories. I really enjoyed our discussion today. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a great experience.
Yeah, and yeah, well, have a great day, and thanks everyone. Have a great